Hey there.
That intro music is just like we better be good, you know, the build up. It's like the shark attack.
I know that music is really a setup. Hi, good to see you too.
Good to see you too.
Because the whole world's watching.
That's right. Hey everybody. We're a team of 3 today. We thought that would be fun. I'm Jessica. I moved to a men's program director and I live here in Las Vegas, Nevada.
I'm Shelly. Sorry, Millie. I am the operations coordinator of Move to Amend, and I live in Sacramento, California.
My name is Millie Harmon. I am the outreach coordinator and I live in Northern Arizona.
Cool. Well, I'm glad we got to do this. It's been kind of a bananas week. But maybe we should start out before we talk about that to just give a brief intro of what Move to Amend is in case anyone here is new.
Who are we?
Who are we?
What do we want to do?
Well, I can start. Okay, so Move to Amend, in case you're not familiar, is a national grassroots organization working to confront corporate power and money as political speech. So we're working to pass the 28th Amendment to the US Constitution that says corporations are not people and money is not free speech.
Pretty much.
Did I miss anything?
I mean, I don't know. We could talk about our structure a bit. We're grassroots. We're part of the national leadership team, which is board and staff and pretty horizontal how we operate at the national level. But we're small at the national level, but we support hundreds of organizers on the ground in their respective communities, educating people about corporate constitutional rights and money in politics and the amendment process. And also passing resolutions and putting it on the ballot. And so some of our successes would be that I think we passed over 800 local resolutions at the city and county level. It's been on the local ballot, I think almost 400 times, and it's only lost once. And 20 states now have passed resolutions in support, either by legislature and in 4 cases, like in California, it was both legislature and on the ballot, that, you know, these states have resolved to support a 28th Amendment if it passes Congress. So we're grassroots, and that's how we build our movement.
So that's us. And I just want to say, just in case you're like, why are you doing this right now? Move to Amend not only is working to pass the 28th Amendment, but we take like a movement building approach to all of our work. And so everything we do is in the spirit of building a strong democracy movement. And the amendment is a step in that direction, but the end goal is actually like a democratic, just, sustainable world. So we talk about all the things. We talk about corporate power and white supremacy and patriarchy and how all of these things work together. So that's why we're here.
Well, and I would just add, because, you know, the catchphrase is Citizens United. And this is what, you know, people have been talking about for a few years now as the sort of the start of corporate personhood. Which is a complete farce. This precedent actually goes all the way back to 1886 it wasn't even a Supreme Court ruling. It was a footnote by someone who was connected with the railroad company. So look at that corruption all the way back. Can you imagine, right? Because our founding was so perfect and all of that.
Yeah. Well, Millie, that's like a really good segue actually into what's happening now, because it's an example, another example of how there's these horrible things that happen, and we need to be able to step back and see the historical context for what's going on, and that these things are all connected and they're not happening randomly. So should we talk about this week? Because a lot. Hi, Yolanda.
Hi, Yolanda. I've noticed you're pretty faithfully here every Friday. So really glad to have you, and you're a Sacramento local.
Yay.
But let's cover that Supreme Court a little bit more. This has obviously been a very big shift in the past week, with a pretty significant loss. Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, as I'm sure everyone watching knows. But why is this important? Why is our system set up so a death of an 87-year-old woman is so important?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It almost seems undemocratic that so much power is in the hand of one person, who, you know, no matter who the person is, it doesn't actually matter. Like the fact that 1/3 of our federal government structure is unelected and unaccountable and serving life terms, I don't know, seems like kind of a problem.
Yeah, I would say it's a problem. Yeah, I think that laid bare, and I don't know, you know, how many people are looking at it in this way, but I think our goal is to help people look at it in this way, that the fact that our democracy, which is a whole nother topic, right? Whether we have ever had one and what that means. But, you know, it was presented as like, this is the thread. This is the thread that is holding everything together, is one human being who is, you know, we won't get into her entire record. There's been some incredible things, and there's also been some things that we should be able to talk about that are problematic, but that's not really what we want to talk about today, because this is more about power and democracy. So it should be really disturbing, you know, the grief that everybody was mourning democracy when she died. And that is an indicator that our system is inherently undemocratic, and everything happens kind of by chance. And we don't really have we don't have any control or say really in the bottom line fundamental, you know, how things are structured and how things are decided. And so that should be what we're talking about with her death.
I think our country also does a really good job of setting us up to be outraged at the wrong things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that there was so much media attention on this loss. Why aren't we talking about how we can change this? Why aren't we talking about there actually not being a set number of seats in our Constitution for the Supreme Court? Right. Why are we not talking about everyone on the court is establishment approved? So even if we talk in the sense of conservatives and liberals, again, these are all approved by people in current power who are so brainwashed, controlled by, you know, big money and, you know, the corporate elite. So I think we need to redirect our outrage.
Yeah, and the fact is, there are people who are discussing packing the courts, and there's a handful of people in Congress who are saying it, which we know saying it doesn't translate into anything. But there is no intention by the people in leadership in Congress whatsoever to, you know, really use everything at our disposal to fight this.
Mm-hmm.
But they will use it to get people to the polls. You know, so it's a little messed up. That's all.
Yeah. And like in these moments, I always feel very surprised at the surprise that people seem to have when like people aren't playing fairly. You know, like people are like, well, Mitch McConnell wouldn't do this because of what he said in 2016. You know, I don't know where that confidence comes from. But
so you're saying
I'd say
the term in itself, court packing. I mean, if that's not already loaded from the get-go, sounding biased as heck, that's ridiculous. We're given a word to talk about it that's already telling us that this is something we shouldn't talk about.
And in terms of Mitch McConnell and his word, I mean, you know, honestly, first of all, right? But like, he already said that he wasn't going to keep his word. So now you want somebody who already gave his word that he's not going to keep his word to keep his word. I mean, it's just, I don't know what the strategy is here at all. There is none.
Yeah.
The answer.
Yeah. And I think like the emotional level, what people are looking, people are so desperate for some level of safety or security or like predictability right now. I understand that. But it's not going to come from the federal government, like that's the wrong place to look for that. But I really feel for how hard it is to confront the reality of what these institutions are and how little safety there is in them. But I think that's necessary if we're going to make change. We have to tell the truth and not be ahistorical about it.
Right.
And we have to be real that our options are more than voting, like there are other ways to take action than voting. And now we're like, oh, the only way to save the court is to vote for Biden, which like, this doesn't make sense. This is not like actually how the progression of actions will like occur that will make that possible.
Well, and we should also, be able to discuss Biden's role in the current court composition makeup. Like that's another absurd thing. Like, yes, I can understand the arguments for doing that. I don't have to think about that because I'm in a state where my vote doesn't count because, democracy. But, I don't see who it serves to not name so that we don't keep ending up back here again. That the person who can save the court played probably a bigger role than anybody who's currently like out here including humiliating a Black woman and a survivor in front of the entire country, So we don't need to lie or sugarcoat this, even if we're going to vote against Trump, which is completely fine and valid. But we're going to keep ending up back here again if we keep whitewashing history, pretending things that are bad or not bad.
It's really important.
And then when we, I think this hooks back again into our work and making the people's will real. How do we do it? The supreme law of the land, the whole reason that we are attempting a 28th Amendment, as hard as that sounds, is because it's the only way to go above them and cut to the chase and say, no, this is the demand we're making. Don't twist that.
Yeah, Millie, exactly. And I think that point gets lost sometimes too when people are like waxing romantic about the Supreme Court, which is like, they gave us this, or Ruth Bader Ginsburg in her time gave us this. And like, actually the Supreme Court doesn't give us things. We demand things, and we have generations of movement that organize to shift culture to the point where they better, you know what I mean? And so it's like, I think it's really important for us not to get like too small when we think about how much we appreciate certain figures, because that doesn't happen in a vacuum. The Supreme Court is only responding to organizers, So
when we back them into a corner.
Yeah, not willingly. Yeah, totally. So like, we have the power here, and in so many ways, we're just being told like that that's not the case. Classic.
Right. Boom.
I just want, if I can just make a plug here real quick, since we're talking about systemic problems and what we do beyond voting. So, we have been talking about the 28th Amendment, obviously, for a long time, but we've also been talking about what would it be like to have our right encoded in the Constitution instead of having to like hope that courts will rule in our favor and like have our, for instance, reproductive freedom completely vulnerable in the hands of people. Like, what would it be like to encode our movement demands in the Constitution and to think about larger constitutional renewal? And so we've been having this conversation a long time, and we're going to have it again in this moment, which is unprecedented. So we're going to have a 2-day virtual event on October 24th and 25th. And I'll tell some more about that, and we'll share links later. But I just want to say, like, I think in this moment, we really have to be thinking way bigger than like voting. Vote, of course, sure. It takes 5 seconds, vote. But, that's literally the least you can do. And so what we need to be doing is have a movement-led conversation about constitutional renewal. What are the rights that actually need to be protected and that are not being protected in our Constitution?
And before you go and freak out, because we said renewing the Constitution, we actually want to imagine what we need in a society to thrive and be well. And I invite you to, research some other countries' constitutions, because actually people rewrite their constitutions all the time because they're better and they're more beneficial. And it's not a big freak out. It's not them burning down their national pride. There is a lot of, worth in revisiting things, especially decades and decades and decades later. Decades, you know what I mean, centuries. But even it wasn't even good until we got the Bill of Rights. So let's not talk about this being perfect to begin with.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, most other countries that have, these constitutions are like so beautiful and so vibrant and so comprehensive, and they're like renewed every 20 years, which we're not like founding fathers worshipers in this circle, but it's important to note that Thomas Jefferson literally recommended what is currently happening around the world and everywhere else but the United States, that constitutions should be revisited every generation. So that clearly doesn't happen here. We also have this very weird the way that we revere or we're taught to revere our Constitution in this country is very unusual. No one else has this kind of orientation. Nobody else thinks God sent it down from heaven, even though if you look at them, they look like they would come from whatever God I think is real. Whereas ours is a property rights document inherently. The Bill of Rights was an afterthought, and there are many people on the right in particular who don't think the Bill of Rights should even exist. So that's the mentality, at the root of all of this.
I want to underscore what you said right there, which is that this was a property rights document. Our foundation was prioritizing property over the majority of the people in the country. And if this last week has told us nothing but this, it is that property still is held so much more highly than the worth of human life. And I don't even want to say human life. I want to say people of color, poor, marginalized folks. Property. Let's talk about it.
The Constitution is still working exactly as it was intended to work at the time it was written. So we should never be surprised. We should never be confused or wonder why things are the way they are.
Yeah. And since we're on this topic, like, it's a little bit of a can of worms, right? Because when we start talking about constitutional renewal, it's very scary for people for all the reasons you two just listed. But I think it's important to note, like, we cannot be scared of a conversation about a better world. That's dangerous, right? We're not having a constitutional convention next month. What we're doing is having a conversation. If you were going to write a constitution today, what things should be included in it? And like Greg said here in the comments, like, what would reflect the current conditions? And it's amazing how many people are very scared of even having the conversation. But like, nothing will change if we can't imagine something better. So.
Caitlin says, let's take ownership of our country and make sure our Constitution serves us.
Imagine that.
Also, I wanted to say hi to Judith Wells Wahlberg, who said hello earlier.
Hey, and Linda. Hey, folks.
So moving into our current reality, what does that look like? We've got hurricanes, we've got fires. The COVID deaths within this country has now surpassed 200,000. We also want to highlight that we all said it was so safe for children at the beginning, and we should all send them back to school. But kids are getting it. Kids are getting sick. Kids are dying. And also to really underscore that almost all of the U.S. kids and teens who have died from COVID-19 were Hispanic or Black. And if that doesn't just, give you the heebie-jeebies and really re-emphasize that we are still racist as F, I don't know what
percentage again, Millie?
let me open that article and
Sorry.
no, that's we want that.
I know
The article so you reference that, so you don't think we're just like, you know, making up what we want to continue our narrative.
Well, I think that the point behind that is that like everything has to be approached with like an intersectional perspective, because there's nothing that's separate from our history and the way that some people's lives are prioritized over others in this country. So yeah, almost all US kids and teens who've died from COVID-19 were Hispanic or Black. So as people, especially, I live in the suburbs now, and there's just so many like white families who are just like, this is fake, this is like my kids, whatever, like have no concept of what's happening outside of their small circle because they don't know anyone who got it or whatever. That's like oppressive behavior when it's racialized to that degree.
Yeah.
So there's that.
So it was 17 out of the 121 children that have died in the US from COVID who were white.
Wow. So less than 10%. Less than 10% of youth deaths from COVID were white kids.
So there's that. That is a really important perspective. Like none of this can be detangled, right? And speaking of kids, well, you guys, I don't have any kids, but I mean, this week there's still just like so many people trying to figure out how to be and what to do with kids at home, and this shift in education.
Well, speaking on that, so a really big, a big thing happened in that Zoom was able to censor meaning stop a presentation by a Palestinian activist at, it was SFU. So, I mean, this is a big thing because if we stop to think about the tools that we're using to keep ourselves safe in a time of COVID, they're private tools. We are live streaming from Facebook. We're live streaming from Twitter. We are, and Zoom. And Zoom was the one who actually pulled the plug and said, because of pressure from Israeli lobbyists, we will not be allowing this conference to go out through our platform. So, I mean, that says a lot. That is our educational institutions being controlled, being censored by private companies, you know, that are being pressured by military connections that we have. It's all very, very sick. But it also makes us think about the more that we are like, well, yeah, we don't want our kids in contact with each other. We need to examine the platforms that are going to be offered, the materials, the resources that are going to be offered. We've known for years and years and years that the National Teachers Association gets most of its funding from big oil. You know, it's like, what? Like that doesn't mean that our kids are going to get any sort of a fair view or perspective on what's going on.
Yeah, it's like another layer of privatization of education that is kind of like hard to foresee, because these circumstances are so weird that like even public education is now being run through private companies who can say you're not allowed to talk about that.
Yeah. Are
you kidding me? And can you imagine if this, I'm sorry, but like if there was an Israeli activist, I mean that this is an absolutely horrific story, and just like, of course, more of this to come is just another tool of like suppressing conversations about that. That's really scary. And I think, Millie, you had said yesterday, like, which is such a good point, that as education is like figuring out how to adapt to this, there's going to be more and more like tools that come up, right, for education, like whatever programs or private things. And it's just going to further like that gap for accessibility.
And who has the time to recorrect, you know, the coursework of their child? We don't even have time to sit down with them and mentor them at the computer with whatever they're given. You know, it's an impossible situation.
Mhm.
I can't imagine.
And this is important too. Caitlin is bringing out white folks disproportionately have been able to work from home versus service workers or other workers who have been able to go to work and be exposed, who are disproportionately people of color. Also, a lot of families of color have had to live in close proximity to each other, thus increasing exposure risk. I think a lot of white folks imagine that when they are not getting it, it is because they are smarter, which is just wrong. And, you know, that's the racism of privilege.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the beginning of it, we said to ourselves, we were chatting with ourselves that like, wow, we're able to stay home and order stuff to be delivered. Like the rest of the poor people are going to be out there dying. And that's, you know, and I think our widening wealth gap is just sort of, you know, sending that snowballing down.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything's just enunciated. So yeah, the Zoom thing was just wild. The censorship on Twitter this week was really weird. Like, I feel like we could talk for an hour about this, which we're not going to because not everyone's like a Twitter person, but what is happening?
I'm a Twitter person. So I can tell you what happened that day and you can tell me to take off my tinfoil hat or whatever. You know, on the much anticipated date of the announcement in regards to Breonna Taylor, which, you know, we're going to talk more about that later. But they knew it was coming and they, you know, prepared on a lot of different fronts. And I would say Twitter also prepared. So I woke up that morning and I ended up in an exchange with somebody where every reply that I sent wouldn't show up. It would like say that it sent and then it would look and it wouldn't even have the little one thing. It would just be like it never happened and it went off into the ether. So that happened for about an hour. And then that ended and I noticed a lot of people on Twitter were starting to notice that accounts that would be the type of accounts that would maybe speak out and support and maybe try to organize on behalf, you know, and kind of helping to, you know, make this uprising real elsewhere besides Louisville, started to get bans. And so I saw one example of an account that has about 10,000 followers. And all she did was post that this decision was horrible and those 3 police officers should have all been indicted for murder. And then she caught a 12-hour limit. So that means that only her followers can see what she's tweeting. And so, you know, it limits your reach on a day where people are really trying to like push things forward. Then my news feed, a retweet of a video came up, but it said the video was unavailable. So I clicked on the video and it was an account that Twitter said I had muted, but the account was a local, like independent journalist in Louisville. Like, why would I have ever muted this account? And also, isn't it odd that an account that is, you know, documenting what's happening on the ground there is by chance this account that I randomly muted for maybe it was a slip of the fingers, you know, it was just weird. And then shortly after that, I did something that I do all the time, which is tell some blue check. In this case, they were, you know, advising that protesters be peaceful because we don't know the difference between peaceful and nonviolent in this country. And also that you know, protesting was like feeding into what Donald Trump wants and yada, yada, yada. And I'm a little more spicy on Twitter. So I told them to F off. Something I do. I've probably done this 5,000 times since I started on Twitter. And immediately I got a 12-hour ban for doing this. So something strange was afoot, and that's all that I know.
Yeah. Well, and that happens all the time. Like, you know, leftists get Twitter or get shadow banned all the time, but it was extreme yesterday. Like, I'm not super on Twitter, but I mean, left and right, leftists
too. It was just like they were doing little things enough to where, like, maybe with me being so on Twitter, I can put together this timeline that's maybe compelling, but to most people, it's not enough to like really make, you know, so, you know, if they are doing what I think they're doing it in such a way where it's really hard to like detect or like find a real there. And when you talk about it, you sound like a paranoid person. So,
well, it's another example of just like, we have these private tools and that is how we are building with each other. And that's scary in a lot of ways. Yeah. So that was weird.
Very peculiar indeed.
Yeah. Well, what else? How's the air where you are? Because you're in Sacramento, Shelly. How's the air this week?
Our AQI is normal right now, but it was very, very, very awful for a while. I'm, you know, really grateful that when the fires happened a few years ago, and, you know, Jessica might not want to like offer this information, but Jessica's from Paradise. And so they lost everything 2 years ago. So it like, you know, moved to amend, you know, we all felt pretty impacted by that situation, and we were able to raise money to get everybody air purifiers. So I'm really lucky that we have 2 really good ones, and we were pretty safe indoors. I had a bad headache. But right now we have what I believe is a reprieve because fire season hasn't started yet. We're not in fire season. I don't know how many people outside of California know that, but we are not in fire season yet.
How's the air where you are, Millie? Did you guys get?
We had when the fires were really blazing. I mean, it kept blowing this way. I mean, but it blew across the country. People were smelling that smoke in Europe. So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we're up against it, and like Shelly said, we're not even into fire season in California. I live in Arizona. This is supposed to be our rainy season. It's monsoon season. We have not had rain. And they say we're just not going to have it this year, which is just unbelievably scary in a state as dry as this, because it's just setting us up for for a lot of fires and a lot more displacement of people. And I mean, that's a huge thing to consider because we're already facing a housing crisis where people are unable to make their bills and they're getting moved out, and now combine that with fire displacement. And another really upsetting thing that happened to me happened here locally, which I'll take a moment, but I live in a rural town in northern Arizona. I think we're 27,000 or something like that, and like anywhere else, there are people without homes on the streets, and so in the winter there has been. We have a homeless coalition, the Ruby Valley Homeless Coalition, who has created a facility, and they are in the process of expanding it or trying to expand it into an overnight shelter. Right now, it's just somewhere people can go during the day because our temperatures here, 115, 120, really unsafe. So we're in a pandemic. People, again, more and more people are on the streets, and our city council had the opportunity to waive it was a sprinkler system ordinance until they were able to get funding, which they qualified for CARES Act funding. But of course, this was hung up on this waiver by our city council, right? This waiver has already been approved in winter months when it drops below 32. They have 2 paid staff people up at night, making sure there's no fires. So that situation has already been approved for the winter months. And then when it came about now, let's waive these sprinklers so we can get CARES Act funding to actually rehab the building, actually put in the sprinklers, and actually serve our homeless community in a time when people are dying from a pandemic, they all stood up and said, oh, la, la, you know, city codes are so important. I just don't see how a pandemic being homeless outweighs the risk of a fire in this building. And it's so confusing, you know, and we had an opportunity, but again, it's sort of like this surface, like we can't have our town housing, convening people off the streets. And the biggest ask from the coalition was that they get overnight housing. Why? Because a lot of the people that they serve don't need any services during the day because they're working. Because they're working and they can't afford housing. And we're qualifying for the CARES Act funding to set this right. But like, so our communities, it's like, what is government doing for us? What is happening when, you know, and of course there are representatives from like, you know, the business bureau or whatever it is there, of the concern of homeless people coming into a building in town, and what would that look like for people who want to move here? I don't know. It's a pandemic. It's a pandemic.
Yeah. It seems like I don't know. We could put the sprinkler on the back burner for a second.
But I'm just saying, and I'm connecting this to this place right now because more and more people will be displaced.
Yeah.
More people will be put on the streets. Why are our communities not proactively prioritizing the health and safety of all of the residents?
Yeah, because it's not just the pandemic. It's like the climate is collapsing, the economy is crashing, all of these converging things are happening, and everyone in our leadership is either in denial or just doesn't give a shit. I mean,
or prioritizing the Better Business Bureau.
Well, exactly. That's what I mean by not giving a shit. I mean, it's happening here. I know in Vegas, there's a lot of really happening too.
I mean, that's the thing. People are clinging so hard to like the rules and regulations and the status quo and like the things that make them feel in control. And it's like, no, I live in a city where there's probably hundreds of thousands of hotel rooms here. It's Las Vegas. I mean, that's all it is. And thousands of people living outside when it's 120 degrees outside, or under the city. There's a whole tunnel system under the city where lots of unhoused people live, and they get flooded all the time whenever there's any rain. And it's like completely unsustainable. There's all these empty rooms during a pandemic, people living outside. It seems like you could just put them inside and that would help a lot. But, you know, like we can't think that big because that's being, I don't know what that's being. It's being too much to try to house people and meet immediate needs. It's like unreal. And yeah, exactly. Bought and sold is right. I mean, the hotel industry here is obviously running everything. So, you know, that's where the loyalties lie, not with the people who live here, but with the MGM Grand or whatever, you know, it's just all, it's like, it's so Vegas too. It's such a facade. It's so like, look at these bright, shiny lights that still exist, but like, don't look downtown, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. And again, what we're seeing the prioritization all the way, you know, from the federal level. Nobody's trying to help our communities anymore. Where's Congress? What happened? Did they stop having that conversation about stimuluses?
They're gone. They went back home.
Peace.
They have their feet up on the recliner chair, probably watching Judge Judy.
That's just a horrific afternoon. But yeah, like, okay, so Anonymous is saying, like, you know, we can force change institute officials that work objectively. Yeah, we can force change. Like, we agree. And, you know, we are seeing right now how much direct action is getting a much better response than, I mean, I know you all, you've been calling your representatives for 10 years. Like, you're those people. Look where we are. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying stop calling. I'm not saying don't vote. I'm saying do more. I'm saying we can force change. And these people have names and they have addresses and they have records. And I don't know. We can't continue to not have bold solutions when stuff is so bad. So, anyway, so yeah, climate change.
And bold solutions can come without a white man leading Met Shell. And I'm so sorry if that is upsetting, but like this now hashtag running around listening to Bernie, like I'm so sorry, but like he's not, what's that gonna do to us? We know about progressive ideas. We know about them because we need them and we're humans, you know, but we don't need some sort of a savior in front of us that we all have to get behind and then convince the status quo that they're okay enough to get in. Like this can't be the process.
Well, and this is the liberal, you know, the Democrat and liberal kind of mentality that is being like projected onto us, which is that they think, oh, you guys loved Bernie. So, you know, and it's like, it was never about that, you know, but they're, you know, there's often like a cult of personality and a savior thing that happens. And, you know, it's very dangerous. It's a big reason why we're in the place that we're in right now, is not being able to look at people objectively. And, you know, most of the people who supported Bernie can also look at him objectively, but that breaks some people's brains.
Yeah. Yeah.
One more thing, I guess, before we leave the fires, we're taking a moment to talk about inmates. And, you know, for California, a lot of our fire prevention and firefighters came from convicts. And we stand really grateful to them because for years and years and years, they have been the unacknowledged people taking really scary risks. But now with this, we've evacuated them into tiny boxes where they were still in the risk of fire. And another case that was particularly, sorry, you guys, I lost my thing, but a man who fought wildfires while in prison for years and years, served his sentence, had people waiting to pick him up, and ICE got him, you know? And so what does he face now? And what kind of a system do we have where we enslave people and then set them up to, you know, be sucked back into our, who knows what's going to happen to him now, you know, is he waiting a sentence? Is he going to sit in detainment for how long on taxpayer dollars? Is he going to be, you know, deported to somewhere, who knows where maybe his, you know, well-being is not safe? I'll throw that on the table.
So, you know, let's be very explicit here that California is a Democrat-led state, very, very, very much so. And this is on the heels of Governor Gavin Newsom, like, making this big photo op announcement that was supposed to kind of pull attention away from the cruelty and exploitation of this system, by saying that there would be, you know, opportunities for reentry into society as firefighters. But then, so, you know, everybody was abuzz about that. This story is not getting a lot of attention. This is the same state. So, yeah.
And I want to just take a minute to acknowledge a comment that came in about how is this related to Move to Amend. So this is a broadcast that we do every Friday to talk about what happened during the week and try to make sense of it through our analysis. This is related to Move to Amend because Move to Amend resists corporate power and money in politics. And what we're talking about right now is the way that these systems are upheld by for-profit companies, detention centers, prisons. Like, all of this is related to corporate power because corporations are deciding our laws and policies. They're deciding, like, how everything is working. So, I mean, the truth is that almost anything that comes up during the week. What?
The Constitution empowers them to do all of this. They're protected by it, and it is completely legal. So that, you know, that is the problem with corporate rule and their constitutional standing, is that they have more power over us in the 13th Amendment. And anyway.
Well, I think it's our focus. I mean, the real value in our work is because we can connect corporate power to so many different issues that people are struggling with. And so often that is the roadblock really holding things back. Why can't we ban fracking? Why do we get to let Mr. Governor Newsom run around fracking wherever he wants to, pointing at Trump saying, oh, he caused global warming? Like, this is not okay, because we can't even ban fracking, because in the cases where communities have tried to do that, the federal government has set the precedent. Corporations are people. They come into a court with all of the same, most of the same rights, and a masses of money. There's no chance.
Yeah, so that's actually the kind of the point of this show, is because a lot of times people understand this issue theoretically, and like, yes, it is in theory wrong that corporations are people, but what does that look like in our world? What does corporate constitutional rights translate into when we're looking around us? And so that's kind of the goal of this, is to make those connections to especially current events, so that it can be real. Because to a lot of people, it's not real until they can see actual examples of what happens when corporate rule.
And as we mentioned before, the conversation often gets so limited to money and politics.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Them gaining free speech rights is just the tip of the iceberg. And with that, they don't just get the ability to flood our elections, but they also get the ability to not speak. They have the ability, like in that recent Monsanto case, they proved that because of their rights under the Constitution, they don't have to disclose the cancer-causing chemicals in their products.
Yeah.
So these are all things that are sort of outside of the normal scope of talking about Citizens United and getting big money out of politics.
Thank you. That's so important.
Yeah, So just because I went to a store the other day, and I just like haven't been in this section for a long time, but all this stuff about Roundup. So if folks don't know, there's actually, I think, been more than one decision around this, but California legally, we passed laws that said if your product is a likely carcinogen or known to be a carcinogen, like you have to label that. And Monsanto and their product Roundup, which is a probable carcinogen, sued, and so they have the right not to speak. And I just had my kid not that long ago. We were in the store and we just passed by the Roundup, and I don't know. It's in order to go get my food, I have to like look at this carcinogen that many people don't ever get the opportunity to learn it's a carcinogen. I don't know. It's just, the tentacles are everywhere. Corporate constitutional rights.
Yeah.
Before we leave, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just also before we leave ICE, I think that it's important to highlight there was a whistleblower who came out. They were doing the secret hysterectomies without women's knowledge. And of course, when we talk about that, it's also important to note someone made profit in there. There was a procedure that went done that was charged to someone, and there is a money trail there. That's huge. And it's also sort of important, and there was less coverage of this is not the first time to happen. And I mean, it's not the first time outside of the Holocaust to happen. There was instances in the 70s and 80s in LA where Chicano women, the same things were happening to them. They were being sterilized when they went to the hospital to give birth. So this goes into so many areas. And most definitely, when we talk about ICE, when we talk about detention centers, there are for-profit agencies at work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the most like fundamentally disturbing thing that someone could do to another person. Like that's so.
Yeah. I don't have words.
I don't think there's anything worse.
I don't have words.
Yeah, that's a hard one to talk about. It's
has a big, like, I don't know, more breedery than a lot of women I know, but it's just like, I can't.
Life.
So, what's going on over there?
Sorry, pop up, opening another article. Don't multitask while live streaming. Sorry.
Dean was asking if there's a petition about citizenship for folks who've been working on fires in California. I see there's like a change.org petition. I just did a quick Google search for it. So you can check that out. I don't know exactly what it does because I haven't read through it, but I'm sure there are people doing good work on it.
And continuing the conversation is huge too, because so often ice raids happen, things happen, nobody talks about them, it's not reported. And I think that's a huge part of changing culture and getting people to actually stand up and, take action is knowing the start.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we do get sometimes people like wondering why we're being so critical, right? I feel like sometimes they're like, oh, you're saying things that are not fun. But like we have always maintained this commitment that we're going to tell the truth. And right now the truth just sucks so bad. And I'm so sorry. But I think it's really, really important for us to keep our eyes on the culture that allowed these things to happen and not get let this moment radicalize us rather than lead us to despair is the quote that people are saying. And I think that's really, really real. It's super hard because everything's so hard right now, but we can't pretend that really hard things aren't happening just because it's too much. So I think that's right, Millie. The next thing we were going to talk about is Breonna Taylor.
Well, I mean, I guess to lead off from what I talked about earlier in terms of the Twitter censorship that appeared to be happening, I mean, the announcement was Wednesday, and on Monday was when the National Guard was ordered to Louisville.
Do you want to summarize what the announcement was in case anyone missed it?
Yeah, so no one quite knew what to expect, except I think we all knew it was going to be bad. And they obviously did too. And so there were 3 officers who were involved in the murder of Breonna Taylor in her bed with a no-knock warrant. And there was one officer who ended up being indicted for shooting at the wall. I mean, yes, we can live reckless endangerment, but it's still the property over people vibe is very much there because it was a wall that was shot that got this man indicted, and the woman who was murdered in her own house is not getting justice. So yeah, people were rightfully mad about that. But what we saw from these videos from people that I had allegedly muted at some point was that, there were militias all over the streets in Louisville, National Guard, and also LMPD, who, I saw videos of them hog tying protesters, just, really demonstrating who they are, which, so understandably the powers that be wanted to limit what people could see happening in Louisville. There's a lot there. I don't even know.
So to add to this, what I was reading and getting my pop-up, Jenny sent me an article. I did not know this. Kentucky's only Black female state lawmaker who wrote and introduced Breonna's Law, which this was a law introduced that, it basically forced police to knock and verbally announce themselves, not much else. But she was taken into custody Thursday night during protests in downtown Louisville against the decision not to charge the officers. She was arrested with a handful of protesters near the First Unitarian Church and the Louisville Free Public Library. Her arrest was on a first-degree rioting charge, a felony, along with failure to disperse and unlawfully assemble. The only female Black state lawmaker, rioting charges for showing up.
Wow.
Yeah. I will say, I think this all happened after we had checked in yesterday, but one thing that was sort of satisfying, as much of an abolitionist as I am, and believe in freedom of the press, but it was the irony. So Tucker Carlson's publication, The Daily Caller, had sent some journalists to Louisville, and they were arrested for failure to disperse and all those other, stupid charges, being out past curfew or whatever. And they had to be in a holding cell for like almost 24 hours. And the Daily Caller was like calling the station and weren't being permitted to talk to them. And they were all really horrified and upset that their freedoms had been infringed upon that were constitutionally protected, which has been happening since this all began. There's been, I went and did some research. There's been over 850 through the Freedom of the Press Foundation has taken over 800 claims of either false arrest, property damage from the cops like breaking their equipment, or assault, and actually like harming them. In one case, a woman lost her eye. And so we've seen CNN get arrested. We've seen the woman from the LAist like a couple of weeks ago just get this small woman who is clearly credentialed getting like completely mauled by police and having to go to jail. And so I don't know what's going to happen with that, because it's, I think, the first time that a right-wing, pro-police state outlet has actually been on the wrong end of this. So interesting.
Yeah, for real. I've been thinking about this a lot and trying to imagine, like, what does justice look like in a situation like this? And I think that I don't know that it can exist is the thing, right? Like how like
being dismantled is the only thing
that's the only thing. That's the only thing. There's no, I mean, we can talk about abolition all day long, I'll just say though that like there's no justice in perpetuating the for-profit prison system in Breonna Taylor's name. That's not justice, right? Like justice means abolition.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We haven't been yelled at that many times on the internet today, so maybe I'll stop there.
But also, she's being used as a tool. Her name's being used as a tool. People are giving half-ass solutions, using her name. Politicians are getting up with their little, say her name face mask and pretending like they care. I'm heavily sickened by what a ploy this is. And we're not giving anything genuine. They cut a check to the family before the ruling, as if this is going to like lessen the blow. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, and Keon's making a point about how U.S. courts have empowered police not only to use deadly force in virtually any situation, but that their primary purpose is to protect property. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we did touch on that somewhat earlier, but yeah, that's our entire system, from the Constitution to the front lines, which are the police, is all rooted in these priorities.
Yeah, and that the origins of much of the U.S. police force was rooted in protecting what they considered to be property, which was actually enslaved human beings at the time, like from the very beginning. So yeah, of course. So I think we still don't know yet what the repercussions are of that. I mean, we're not going to take that lying down. So thanks to everyone who's in the streets and playing whatever role your role is in this. We all have a role to play, whether that's on the ground or not. There's a million ways to help. So thanks for that.
I think that we should, with the urgency to be out in the streets, we need to acknowledge the ridiculous conditions that protesters are facing when we are supposed to have that right in this country. We are, I will quote our founding documents, we are supposed to have that right, please. But we're getting everyday footage of, I saw this cops just ramming people down.
Yeah.
And now we're designating these anarchist cities.
That's fun.
Could you imagine being an anarchist and you're like, I live in a city and we've been designated?
I saw a really funny tweet that was like, I'm in the trenches of, this anarchist city, and there's like solidarity and mutual aid everywhere, and like vibrant, I don't know. It was I wish I pulled it up because
that's pretty great. Yeah. Bunch of like Black Bloc being handed the keys to the city or something. Yeah. So that's interesting.
So it's it's scary because now ideologies rather than actions or behaviors, but ideologies are being we've seen this happen at other times in our history. It's happening again.
Yeah.
And I hate to do this, but while it is horrific and, definitely more scary that, Trump is just kind of haphazardly doing these things and targeting people for simply exercising their free speech or having a certain belief. I think we need to talk about Joe Biden. We're not saying what anyone should do in terms of how you vote in November. That's not the point of this conversation. But like we said, we're truth tellers and we are not revisionists. And given the how critical this moment is and how real we all need to be. So Alfonso, he's our engineer. Can you put up this quote that Joe Biden said recently, that we just want people to, I wonder if, said from the, let me see, I can just look at it on my thing. I have said from the outset of recent protests that there, and this is this was a statement that went through many channels before it was released publicly. So I think we need to pay attention to it. No matter what happens in November, we need to know what we're working with. I've said from the outset of recent protests that there is no place for violence and destruction of property. We have a constitution that, backs up what he's saying. Peaceful protesters should be protected, and arsonists and anarchists should be prosecuted. So, and local law enforcement can do that. So let's, what does he mean by anarchist? And does it matter what he means? I mean, that is an ideology, not an act. So, and there's no victims when you have that ideology. So this is dangerous too, right? So whatever happens in November, it's just going to be different styles and maybe different, like how fast things move might be different, or how much lip service is paid to movements that sound nice while actual things that are happening are terrible. We just need to be really aware of kind of what's generally happening in a very general sense. So,
Mm-hmm.
That's all. I mean, that just should be concerning to all of us, because they could do the same thing with, socialists. I mean, even Joe Biden the other day said, like, I beat the socialist. Of course I'm not a socialist. There was a woman who, had a Biden shirt on. I think she had to protect her tweets because it like caused a bit of a storm, but she had on a t-shirt that was pro-Biden and it just said like anti-comunista, right? So there's just a lot of demonization right now of ideologies that are not capitalist in nature.
Yeah. Yeah, and we saw that earlier with the condemnation of anti-fascists. Like, you're criminalizing thought is what that means.
Yeah.
There's like a book about that, right? It like didn't turn out very well.
Yeah, it's a book that, is often somehow been co-opted by the right, hilariously. But yes, I know that book.
Yeah, it's not good. Yeah, and exactly, like the blank check. Like, if all it means to be an anarchist or an anti-fascist is to have that ideology, which is true, then like anybody could be being that way.
He literally said local police can and should prosecute anarchists.
So you have
the words, it doesn't matter, because that's what he said, and that statement went through the whole process that you go through when you're running for president, and before you put words out there, it went through all those channels, and it still came out looking.
Yeah. So you have, let's just be clear, you have the less fascist candidate saying that local authorities should arrest people for being anarchists. Yeah.
Speaking of Biden and anarchy, can we take a moment to laugh?
Yeah. Sorry, people. We're like this shit's funny. We can't help it. We have to.
We really can't.
Also, anarchy is not a state disorder due to absence of recognition of authority. That's wrong. So it's a political philosophy, and I would recommend reading about it. It's actually not a synonym for chaos.
It's not.
Yeah, let's see those pictures because we need a laugh.
So there was, I'll give the background. There was a family in the Twin Cities. I can't recall if it was Minneapolis or St. Paul. And we've seen other examples of this. I wish we could do a whole show on this topic, and maybe we will, because it's hilarious phenomenon. So their garage burnt down, and they reported it to the police as them being targeted for having Trump signs in their yard. But somebody tagged their garage with the following.
We're going to go away for a second.
These terrible anarchists, they tag Biden 2020 along with BLM and a really poorly drawn anarchy symbol. So just all of these.
That's hysterical. It feels like when I was a kid and my brother used to try to set me up for things. I'd be like, no, like, good try, but you're 4. Like, who did that? It's so funny. And how the anarchist A is just perfectly within the circle. Yeah. Glorious. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's a delight.
I mean, I would say these common definitions that are, these are not the actual definitions, and that's not like, as somebody who subscribes to some extent to that ideology, that's not my definition, although I don't see what the problem, I'm sorry, Tom Vokola says the common definition of anarchy is one who destroys property and people in the service of resisting authority. That's absolutely false, although property destruction, can often be, so if you are going to the like where I live in Sacramento, there was an action where there was property damage right after the Jacob Blake attempted murder. And they targeted the institutions in our city that actually oppress and allow murder to happen. So our district attorney, who routinely and is funded by our police, her campaigns for office are funded by the cop unions, and then she gets in and never, ever, ever holds police accountable for murdering people. So some windows were broken in that building. I mean, what else are people supposed to do in a system that values property over human lives?
Right.
There's no way to get attention. There's no way to capture media attention. There's no way to put it out on social media. There's no way
protests don't get
covered. People are out of options, and there is severe rage and hurt because they've been oppressed as long as they've been here. So we really have to think, but I do think that Tom is correct in saying that that's the common definition. It is
what people have to believe is that. So that I will agree with.
Yeah, I mean, when the walls of Breonna Taylor's apartment get more justice than she did, it shows us that apparently we need to smash windows and break walls for people to care about things. So, all right.
We also, there's a little, just to say, Trump's finally releasing some aid to Puerto Rico. Not like they've been waiting for 3 years. Not like he's just doing it to convince anybody confused that they haven't had any resources or any help from their supposed government. Vote for me.
So, yeah, I mean, Florida is a state that is kind of a battleground state. And it seems like the Latino population in Florida, which is very diverse, as somebody who grew up in Florida, you've got, Cubans in Miami, many of whom identify as white. Most Cubans identify as white in South Florida. But and then where I grew up in Orlando is like Puerto Ricans, and many of them have family in Puerto Rico. Many people in Florida have family in Puerto Rico. So we've got Biden kind of going after the anti-communist Cubans for the vote. And then you've got Trump, who obviously completely failed the island at the time, but now is coming through with aid to the families, people who have family in the United States who are voting in Florida. So it's definitely a political move. But it's very interesting the way the two candidates are kind of coming at this.
Mm. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, 3 years too late? Cool.
So what's something good? Give me something good.
Something good. Shelly, you've got a good thing.
Shelly has a good
thing. It could end up, it's just a source of hope that I have right now.
Yeah.
And we all need that. So where I live in Sacramento, which is, a place where Democrat-controlled city, yet 85% of our CARES Act money went to the police. We have, almost fully city council backed campaign against rent control. They're trying to give our mayor ridiculous amount of power. So we've got these ballot measures coming up. But rent control has been a really long fight in Sacramento. It's been very, I've been part of it for the past few years. And, we tried to get it on the ballot. Local government blocked it. And then, I don't know, maybe it was 6 weeks ago or so, a court ruled that it would actually go back on the ballot. And so suddenly we have a campaign that we have to do. But, it's just, it feels like something that could actually be won. And that we can all put everything we have into. So I've been involved in that. I've been text banking, and we'll start phone banking, but it's like bringing our community together in a really big way. And while it's terrible, the moment that we're all in terms of the housing crisis, the timing of that and this ballot measure is actually a good thing for the ballot measure, because I think that people, similar to how they look at the healthcare, are now, more and more people, if they're not actually impacted, they know people who are, and that's, kind of the key to getting people to care about things. So, there is a huge corporate backlash against it. I mean, the mailings that we're getting constantly, and these are all paid for by, like corporations,
developers and stuff.
But at the same time, I believe in us, and I yeah, we've got like so this is like our whole local government, and they're all saying no to rent control.
Wow.
This man right here, Steve Hansen, was recently ousted from his seat by a socialist, Katie Valenzuela, who is not featured on this ad. She is actually at the forefront of the movement for rent control. So it's really heartening, even though, anything could happen in November. But if we did get this win, I think it would be very energizing. And just, folks, like, yes, we do our work on the national level, and that's super important. And a lot of us, but, we have to think locally too. And we have to get involved with local fights, because some of these things will make more of a difference in people's lives in a more immediate way. Rent control will change this city. It'd be great to have it on the national level, or, more money for Section 8 or whatever. But that's like not going to happen anytime soon. But locally we can, yes, they all own real estate. There are no renters. I'm not even sure if Katie Valenzuela is a renter, but she's the only one in our local government who supports rent control. But yeah, it's all owners who are saying vote no. They're not tenants. They have no idea what we're experiencing.
Yeah, that would be huge. That's amazing.
So, it just gives me something where I feel like I'm, doing something.
Yeah, that's big.
That way. Yeah.
Real and tangible. Good for you.
Yeah.
Aw.
And the feedback I get with just text banking, I'll start phone banking tomorrow, so we'll see. But the feedback in text banking has been very, very, very warm and heartening. So
that's awesome. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. That is a positive for sure. Well, my positive is, again, local and small, but feels really good. We got, we're working on some town fridges here in Las Vegas, some free refrigerators that sit out in public that people donate to, and people come what they need. So we just got 2 more approved this week, and we're looking at another. So I think that'll give us a total of 4 here. That's really exciting. So, I'm feeling, it's always good to know that, like, there are like small immediate wins that, like, actually, when someone can eat food when they didn't know they could before, like, that's a win. So,
yep.
Yeah. What's your yay moment, Millie? Do you have one?
I do have a gay moment, and I don't know what the status is exactly now, but a couple Indigenous water protectors halted the construction of a border wall near Ajo, and they taken into custody, but it did halt. I don't know what is up with their hearings, but they were trying to protect a sacred spring. Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing it. Tohono O'odham is the tribe whose these springs are, an ancient space. And so I think that that's a small win. Halting, bringing attention is always important. And so often things happen here where we don't know It just the media is so suppressed, and so often these gems aren't brought forth. So, yay! Check it out. See if you. I've thrown some money towards their fund, and there's always ways to support things locally. If we can just find out what they are.
That's awesome. Good for them. All right. Well, that's solid.
And one more big thing for us at Move to Amend is we're going to be doing a big fundraising push to get our staff hired back on next month. That's really, really exciting. We were all a little worried there that might ever happen, but we all this movement. We've been working through this as volunteers, just like all of the hundreds of thousands of volunteers across the country who have been doing this volunteer, for the last 10 years. So we're really excited that, it gives, I think it should give us pause and we should celebrate that. We can fall and scoop ourselves up and our supporters are still there carrying us through.
So basically what we've, just to kind of name the situation that we're in. So when the CARES Act, which is the only halfway anything that has passed since everything went to hell, it did not include relief for 501c4 nonprofits, which, maybe probably isn't a bad thing overall because 501c4s are used for, lobbying and often for really bad things. So it can be a dark money vehicle, right? We don't use it in that way. We are grassroots funded, but we have to use it because we also are lobbying for legislation just in a more grassroots way. So we got no relief. And then our supporters are regular people. So a lot of them were taking really bad hits. And so our grassroots support went down. And so we all decided together to lay ourselves off and continue doing this work just like we were doing before. Nothing has changed in terms of what we're giving, but we just needed to kind of tighten up and see how this thing shook out. So what we're asking is that if you are somebody who is in a position to support us, it is preferred to, if you were going to give us $100, maybe give us $5 or $10 a month instead of that, because we can budget on our recurring donations and kind of predict what's going to happen in the future.
We'll take your $100 a month too.
We'll take your $100 a month. We'll take your one-time donation if that's what you're comfortable with. But we just want to let you know why the sustaining donations are more helpful to us just in terms of being able to prepare for all the challenges that lie ahead and be able to be sure we can pay people for their work. So if you are somebody who can step into the place of another Move to Amend supporter who had to step back because of their own financial issues, we ask that you do that because this is going to take all of us. This work is going to, sometimes we're going to be in a position, sometimes we won't. So we want you to kind of think of it in that way, that, maybe now is your time to step up and support what we're doing so that we can continue.
Hey, Tom signed up as a monthly supporter. Thank you. That's amazing.
Awesome. Yeah. You up on here live. If you want to go ahead and chat some more of that in the comments.
Yeah.
But again, it is. Sustainership is really important because, as you can imagine, not receiving money from big foundations, and we don't get a lot of grants. There's nothing like that. We really need to try to track and know we can at least kind of cover our running expenses.
Yeah. And if anybody wants to know how we use our money or what our successes have been, because we are very proud of what we've accomplished on what's always been very much a shoestring budget. But we can, make you feel really good about giving to us if that's what you need. And you can email us at info@movetoamend.org if you have any questions about how we use our money and how we operate.
And it goes far. Like, we use your money so good, so
Yeah,
good.
we don't. Yeah. Jeff asked, where do we donate? So movetoamend.org/donate. And when you get there, you'll have a choice to do a one-time donation or do a monthly donation. And both are amazing. Like, honestly, $2 like helps. But if you can give each month, that allows us to know what our budget's going to be for the following months so that we know how to plan. And so that just allows us to be more thoughtful because we know what we have to work with.
Yeah, and most people, like most of our monthly donations are like 10, 15, you know, we're not asking for anything major. It's just if you are comfortable with making that kind of commitment, whatever you would give as a one-time, think about spreading that out over a year. And what would that look like? And if you could do it that way, it's helpful to us. So it's movetoamend.org/donate. And you can
that's what most of us on staff do. Think about it as, you know, that cup of coffee that you wanted to treat yourself to, you know, feeding families for a movement building is good too.
Yeah, I also want to name that we're all either parents or aspiring parents here. And, you know, you're supporting more than just us.
Oh, yeah. And if money is not how you can get involved, we have other hooks for you.
Oh, yeah.
First of all, sign the petition. Sign it now. movetoamend.org/motion.
Yeah.
This is a huge tool. We use this to lobby. We use this, this is all the petition signers in your area. We compile them. This is a huge tool. It's not legally binding. However, it does show your support for a fundamental change that needs to happen, which is the We the People Amendment.
What we don't do with the motion, which I think should be said, because whenever I hear someone online being like, there's this giant problem, sign a petition, I'm like, what? You know, so like when you're signing petitions, like, is the petition just to say you care about something, or is it like an organizing tool? And so that's what Millie's saying. Like, the approach that we take is like, yeah, you add your name to the list of people who care about this, but also that allows us to get you in touch with other people around you and letting you know what we're doing, and like we're doing stuff with it. It's not just putting it out there.
To take that a step further, so like, yeah, it is very good that we can say, oh, I don't know how many we are now, maybe like 480,000 people have signed this petition. So that's you know, compelling, right? But also, when we are lobbying, which is, you know, how we're getting this amendment through the congressional path, requires us to, you know, court, as much as we hate it sometimes, courting these, you know, representatives and senators to support us. When we can demonstrate how many people in their constituency support it. So when we're talking about even these local resolutions that have been passed, all the way to state, and then when we're talking about our federal representatives, when you sign a petition, you're also showing up in whatever your jurisdiction is, whatever your district is, as a supporter. So if there were lobbying efforts to your rep, to your city council, to any of those, you know, because we go every level of government with this, then you're on record as a supporter, as part of, you know, constituency of the people who represent you. And that has been oftentimes the way that we get them to support us, is they're like, oh gosh, there's 3,000 people in my district who have signed this petition. Okay, I can't really like pretend that this isn't important, you know, so.
And you know, we also can encourage you to directly contact your representatives from all levels of government. We are currently running our Pledge to Amend campaign. This is where candidates and elected officials have the opportunity to take a pledge to say, I support the passage of the We the People Amendment, and I will use my office to do so. This is a really one. People are having such difficulty campaigning right now because we can't like go out and talk to anybody. So people are pretty eager, you know, and they're listed on our website of having taken the pledge. We're able to email out their constituents, but and in a big way, we have 74 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives with HJR 48, our We the People resolution text, and our goal is 75.
Just one more. Could it be your
to your your elected, your representatives, and let's put some pressure on them.
Yep.
And I just want to say, like, when they're talking about how we lobby our representatives, like, they're meaning that super literally. Like, we lobby them. I don't know anyone with a briefcase, is what I'm saying. Like, we're scrappy as hell, you know. Like, we don't have lobbyists who we pay in DC. Like, we go to DC, we like iron our jacket, and we walk in there and lobby them, and we bring you with us, right? A bunch of people in these conferences with us in DC lobbying, people who had never done it before. So.
The majority of folks, I mean, that's the really killer diller, is like we have all of these affiliates from across the country, and we have in years past convened in DC to storm the halls, to go talk to the Congress people who had never even thought it was possible to have a conversation with her, because who does? We're not made to think that. Nobody has given a civics class and they're like, you should tell them what to do. No. So it's really exciting. It's super empowering. We are grassroots. We are people talking on the streets, and I say really, it's our affiliates and volunteers on the ground. Thank you. Sorry for taking your steam there, but it's an amazing, really, really empowering opportunity.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also,
Jeff
like,
and Ellen, new donors.
Yeah.
Sorry, just shouting out new donors.
Shout out. So we already discussed Tom as a new monthly supporter. Thank you, Tom. And then Jeff and Ellen are new monthly donors as well. Thank you so much. And Tony Stefnick, who we love you, Tony, and all the awesome work that you're doing in Washington. But she says, my monthly contribution to MTA is the most important systematic donation. And thank you so much for all that you do. And Tony does a lot too. So that means a lot to hear.
Oh my God, I'm sending a big hug out to Jeff and Ellen, because
Yeah,
thank you so much. Not that they're specialer than y'all, but haven't seen them in a while.
Aww.
One more, we have another plug. Let's plug that PMA again.
Okay, so I say this with so much excitement. We're hosting this People's Movement Assembly towards a People's Constitution. So I said about this a little bit in the beginning, but here's what it is. It's a 2-day-long virtual event, several hours on Saturday, a couple hours on Sunday. We want you there and invested and like in this conversation. We're gonna have a panel of really amazing speakers who knew a lot about constitutions, revolutionary constitutions, the rewriting process, tons of good stuff to learn. Then we're gonna get in small groups, and we're gonna have conversations about the current moment, about what's the world that we want and deserve, and how are we going to get there. So we've got this amazing 2-day process that we invite you into if you want to have this conversation. We recognize that this isn't for everyone. It's a kind of a different event, because this isn't the space for us to come in and talk about, like, should we rethink the Constitution? Is this not fear-based? We're coming in here as visionaries. So if you're down to have this conversation about constitutional renewal, please come. MoveToAmend.org/PMA. We would really love to have you there. Check out the assumptions on that page. See if that resonates with you, if you agree with us. And if so, please join us. This is a super necessary conversation right now towards a movement-led people's constitution, thinking about our movement demands as constitutional rights. We'd really like to have you there. So thank you.
And I do want to note, because we probably forgot to say this earlier, Move to Amend is nonpartisan. We do not support candidates or campaigns. The Pledge to Amend, as I said, we're not promoting their agendas. We are just giving them the opportunity to take the pledge to support our work. But we don't ever support, we don't have political positions such as would fit into the left or the right parties. And so we don't go there.
So yeah, this is being recorded, and it'll be on our Facebook and YouTube and stuff like that afterwards. So you can go back if you missed any of it. See, anything else you need to say?
We also can join our website, visit our website, and you can join as a volunteer. This is actually how we're run, is people across the country having conversations in their town, collecting petition signatures, passing resolutions. And again, we are nonpartisan. We have passed resolutions in many conservative places. Last year,
Walker's hometown voted for our amendments on the ballot.
Scott Walker's hometown, if it cut out.
Scott Walker's hometown voted overwhelmingly for the We the People amendment on their local ballot.
And last Congress, we did have a Republican co-sponsor. So we're open to work with anybody.
Yep.
All right. Well, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you for bringing us into your homes.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging out for a while. Thanks for talking. That was a kind of bananas week, but it's good to have your perspectives on it. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone who has been supporting us in all the different ways and to our new monthly sustainers. We really appreciate that.
Yes, you rock. You're our favorite people of the day. Seriously,
we will
thank you.
make you proud.
Promise. We literally can't do this work without you at all. So Thank you.
All right. We'll have a new week that's less crazy, hopefully, but probably not. But don't worry, because there'll be more of us next week to come and do this again with y'all.
And before we say bye, I haven't seen Doug Jambird Sweet in so long, and so it's really nice to see you. Hope you're doing well.
Yay. All right. Have a nice weekend. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.